Morning, everyone. For me, one of the most powerful things about a brand is its ability to linger with you long after you've experienced it. And I just wonder how many of you can still taste that very interesting liqueur at last night's dinner. Digital is important, but what's the real idea? So don't get me wrong. I'm not about to say that digital is not the answer, but what I am going to say is that we have to keep digital in perspective as one, but only one, of the enablers of great brands. I also want to start to raise the question about the origins of these great ideas that will be the fuel for the new businesses that we want to see in the future. And I'd like to suggest, not surprisingly given my past, that an investment in strategic design is what you should all be doing. Ultimately, a brand has to fulfill a need. It has to meet that need in a way that's compelling, usable and desirable, and a way that it's not being fulfilled by someone else. So from my perspective, and particularly as someone who's seen the strategic role of design grow so much in the last 5 years, I believe it's the magic combination of all of the customer experience journey, all the brand touch points that make a brand loved, used and successful. And I'm building on a lot of what I know has been said already this morning, and I suspect a lot of which will be said this afternoon. There's a lot of good stuff in this chart, but the one that stands out for me is that almost 90% of companies are saying that customer experience is going to be their primary basis for competition. And I find it hard to think of any brands which are completely and uniquely digital. Monzo Bank, quite a new one, is a rare new example, or even there you can still work cash if you want it. As an economy, particularly the millennials, but by no means limited to them, we're progressively spending more money on experiences rather than things. We're not buying as many houses and cars as we used to, preferring to go to the pub, restaurant on holiday instead. And in the UK, we lead the world on casual designing. It's also reflected, I think, in the particular popular content that we consume: Four in a Bed, MasterChef, Bake Off, Place in the Sun, etc. And experience days are also a huge growth area. My favourite example of such a mixed experience strategy at the moment is Rafa. So occasionally I go out cycling. Clothes, racing, sponsorship, cafes, shops, holidays. Oh, is that causing the...
Sorry, everyone.
No, that's good. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. It's all about the customer experience. The medium through which the brand is experienced is really of secondary importance. And as we say in the cycling world, if you've been on a ride and it wasn't captured on Rafa, then it didn't happen. By comparison, I don't know if any of you have seen Juicero, which was a Silicon Valley juicer startup that raised something like £120 million from investors, but was widely ridiculed after the $400 machines were revealed to be the equivalent of 2 hands squeezing a juice box, and that shut down at the end of last year. Now, the death of Juicero is probably the latest case of a San Francisco tech startup collapsing after raising substantial funds, and this is exactly the point that David was making first thing this morning, under the guise of innovation and disruption, but actually failing to build a profitable business. They sold these pre-sold packets of diced fruits and vegetables that plugged into this very expensive machine, which then transformed the contents into juice. The company was roundly mocked last April when Bloomberg reported that users could easily squeeze those packets with their hands and do that at a rate that was faster than the machine could do it themselves. The company's founder, a chap called Doug Evans, who compared himself to Steve Jobs, that should probably have been the important signal, had previously bagged that it wielded 4 tons of force. There was also the point that it was connected to the internet, could ensure that users didn't make the juice with packets that have expired, but the packets themselves had the expiry dates written on them. So it just didn't work. And of course, it was a hugely celebrated startup. It had flattering New York Times profile, and it had an enormous amount of money from quite high-profile firms like Google Ventures, who put millions and millions of pounds into it. Now, I quote from The Guardian, and it's very important that I'm quoting from The Guardian, because what I'm about to say shouldn't be interpreted as my sentiments. So Juiceable has become something of a symbol of the absurd Silicon Valley startup industry that raises huge sums of money for solutions to non-problems. Some also criticize Juiceable and other food tech firms as male entrepreneurs, in effect rebranding what women have done for decades. Now, I really am quoting what was said in The Guardian. And I think that the failure of some of these high-profile startups actually is quite concerning, because it does suggest, and there have been a lot of suggestions, that the high-tech boom could be fizzling out. I think it was quite interesting that the ex-CEO Evans has not commented on the shutdown, but he was most recently posting a video, perhaps appropriately, of himself at the Burning Man festival. I don't have time today, unfortunately, but it's well worth having a look at the background to why Jawbone came to an untimely end. And those cyclists and general adventurers amongst you that will have be fascinated to read about what's going on at GoPro, I think all testament to just being very cautious about whether we have profitable businesses or not. So for me, the reason for the world's, I now realize it's the second most valuable brand, but there we go, being as successful as it is simple. It's not a digital or technical company at the leading edge, unlike what I think the popular perception is. For me, it's rather that they have put the need for the best, the most consistent user experience as the single highest priority in their corporate ethos. And it's been that consistent user experience, I think Patrick mentioned this, with a CEO, Steve Jobs, who believed in that, and a British-born and trained designer at the very heart of the organization that has ensured Apple's success. So for me, it's been their ability to build trust through the use of design, and that means that I, like millions like me, can excuse the brand for costing more than their competition, and can trust the brand to develop new ideas that are going to fit into my lifestyle. So for me, design thinking is about creating intelligent change. The theme of the story is shifting from what is design thinking to look at what we did using design thinking, from design thinking to design doing. In the past year, almost 300,000 job postings have listed innovation, creativity, and strategic thinking skills. Another 250,000 feature design thinking. Making things that people want is better than making people want things. So for me, good design is just good business. I think it was the founder of IBM, Patrick will remember, not me, but the founder of IBM who said this back in the 60s. Interestingly, West Coast venture capitalists will not now invest in new startups unless they have a designer in the senior team. Interestingly, both Airbnb and Uber have designers as their CEOs. And so it's not surprising, really, that the rise in designers in startups is staggering, as is their presence in VC funds. As your man from Airbnb says, who would have thought it? So where are all the designers we need going to come from in the future? The growing need for tech designers is driving the industry to seek out multidisciplinary talent, and that's very much a theme that was picked up when Matt Hancock was speaking earlier on. In the third of John Mader's design and tech reports, and all three of them are actually fascinating reads, he reports that a hunger qualified designers among small and large tech companies. Amazon, Google, Facebook have collectively grown their design personnel by 65% in the past year. Of the startups that he surveyed, Mader found that the design headcount is also expanding. Smaller companies who identified design as important plan to add up to 2 more employees, while so-called unicorns are, expanding exponentially. But who are these designers? Are they limited to certain areas of expertise? Mader, and I think I agree with him, thinks the profession is changing to include hybrid designers, those who are also developers with some skills in programming. In a survey of US designers, a third stated that they had engineering training, for example, where previously there's been a clear line separating those two disciplines. The roles are now becoming much more fluid, and companies are beginning to require expertise in multiple disciplines. He highlighted these 3 different types of design every company needs. Classical design thinking and an interesting new area called computational design. Classic design is the education that designers currently receive in university still, and it's used in media like print and physical displays. Been around for centuries, and I suppose you could argue it's at the core of designers' ability to be creative. Design thinking is geared towards business-focused design, featured on the front row of the Harvard Business Review, and is now featured in virtually every business school on both sides of the Atlantic. The last, computational design, is perhaps most attuned to the needs of tech companies, as it involves an understanding of algorithms and processes, which is vital when you're starting to create mobile apps, internet-connected devices, etc. And hybrid designers are able to recognize the complexities that exist within tech products, as well as the design challenges that lie with developing ideas for users. So the way we educate our children is probably one of the paramount questions that you, as brand owners, should be asking. And I thought that this little clip from the richest man in Asia speaking at Davos last week was quite compelling. Is that going to play?
Education, it's a big challenge now. If we do not change the way we teach, 30 years later will be trouble, because the way we teach, the thing we teach our kids are the things past 200 years is knowledge-based. And we cannot teach our kids to compete with this machine who is smarter. To teach something unique that is machine can never catch up with us. Value, believing, independent thinking, teamwork, care for others. These are the soft part. The knowledge may not teach you that. But that's why I think we should teach our kids sports, entertainment, the music, painting, art, to make sure humans should be different from everything we teach should be different from machine. If the machine can do better, you have to think about it.
So, how does that contrast with the reality of what is currently happening? This was reported only 2 days ago. And I heard Matt Hancock earlier, but I'm afraid I didn't believe him. And I do believe that Jack Ma has probably got something that is quite compelling for the future. Finally, I thought I'd just give you my perspectives on the power of digital and what I think, used positively, it can do to make a difference. And this picks up on a number of the speakers who've talked about the social impact of digital as well.
The critical thing for me is that for every positive, there's an attendant negative. And for all of us in the brand world, it's vital that as we continue to grow and make products and services, we concentrate on making sure that we're contributing to the former and doing everything in our power to make sure we're not doing the latter. So I very quickly got 8 things that I want to talk about in terms of my view of the power of digital. So firstly, it connects us directly to each other without the mediation of press, broadcasters, government and other institutions. And I think a hugely positive example of this might be the revolution of the Arab Spring, where people in totalitarian regimes could self-organize. A negative example of that is the sort of stuff that Toby Young experienced last night, which rightly or wrongly, whether you believe it's rightly or wrongly, has damaged his reputation beyond all belief. And just as alarmingly, the rise of national politics in the Western world. Secondly, it connects us to the world's knowledge. Much as Jack Ma was saying, the world's knowledge is just there for us, so we've actually got to step one step ahead. Positive example is the World Wide Web, the likes of Wikipedia. Negative example is perhaps a whole generation's unquestioning acceptance of everything they see online as being true. And it's fascinating that Twitter has recently informed almost 750,000 people in the US, its US subscribers, that they followed, liked, or retweeted contents from accounts associated with a propaganda effort from a Russian government-linked organization. Thirdly, we can now replicate products at a near zero cost, and so spread availability. I think positive examples include new business models that make services super cheap or even free. But I think negative examples are where the likes of musicians and journalists and cab drivers struggle to make a living because Spotify, Uber, etc. are setting the rate very low. Fourthly, it allows us to deliver real human-driven services more cheaply. I think a positive example of that is enabling lower retail prices online because of lower overheads and better stock management. But negatively, you could argue that those who like face-to-face and telephone are being squeezed out, and so digital is actually lowering inclusivity rather than increasing inclusivity. Fifthly, it allows us to augment the human capacity for creativity. I think positive examples of that are the likes of Photoshop, Instagram, GarageBand. But negatively, just have a look at the devastating effects that piracy is having. Number 6, it makes human beings more productive. So, for example, most office software, navigation tools such as CityMapper have made a huge difference to our lives. But we do waste an awful lot of time with Candy Crush, Pokemon Go, and we're all drowning in email. 2 more to go, very quickly. Number 7, it gives us the power of feedback to optimize systems. So positive examples, the likes of eBay, Amazon, TripAdvisor, where a better service is actually built on peer reviews and ratings. But negatively, what about the endless requests to provide feedback to service providers? I had one the other day from a restaurant asking me to rate the quality of their tap water. Just think of the effect on that brand. And finally and lastly, number 8, it empowers the individual. So flexible home working has to be one of the single biggest benefits that's come from digital. But do the tech businesses drive the gig economy, which many claim is not upholding human rights? So I suppose in summary, very quickly, I'm hugely excited and sometimes overawed by the power of the change that digital can bring to the way we live our lives and to making the world a better place in which to live. But equally, I think it's going to be vital that we keep grounded in terms of the understanding of the consequences of our actions. And I think the user focus and empathy of design-trained individuals can help us to do that. But we need to ensure that there are enough of them in the future coming through our education system. Thank you very much.